Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Jozarov Chess Channel, and welcome back to our Queen's Gambit Decline studies. So in these studies, we have seen some great defenses like the Chigonin defense, Tara's defense. We have seen the beautiful Vienna variation of the Queen's Gambit Decline, the Harvard's attack, and many, many more. And today we're continuing with our Queen's Gambit Decline studies and the Ragozin defense. And many of you have requested more Ragozin defense games, more Ragozin defense analysis. In my opinion, really the Ragozin defense is one of the best methods to play against the anti-Nimzo or counter Nimzo-Indian setup. And I've seen now recently one beautiful game that was played by the Dragon engine against another engine, Zahak, in the Ragozin defense. And I think this is a perfect game that explains really the power of the Ragozin defense. If you want to study something against the anti-Nimzo or counter Nimzo Indian setup, I think the Ragozin defense of the Queen's Gambit Decline is one of the best methods, because in my previous game, you can also check out our previous video that we have analyzed, we have seen a great game by Dragon in the Nimzo-Indian defense. But of course, the Nimzo-Indian is possible if your opponent plays an early knight to c3 move, then you're pinning the knight with the move bishop to b4. But many times white is playing the move knight to f3, is playing the anti-Nimzo or counter Nimzo-Indian setup. Then my recommendation is to go into the Queen's Gambit Decline and afterwards into the Ragozin defense, which is in my opinion the most dynamic way to play the game. So let's see now how the Dragon engine played the beautiful Ragozin defense. In my opinion, you can really use this game as your cornerstone of your preparation of this beautiful opening. So here d4 was played by Zahak. We have knight to f6, c4, e6. So as I said, maybe we could get into the Nimzo-Indian, then we play bishop to b4. But now many times after move knight to f3, this move bishop to b4, in my honest opinion, doesn't make sense. The move bishop to b4 will be probably met with bishop to d2, and then you have this idea trading off more pieces. In my opinion, the main idea of the Nimzo-Indian is sometimes after maybe knight to c3, bishop to b4, and some ideas of maybe e3. Many times you see this bishop, the Darsko bishop, is a bad piece in the Nimzo-Indian defense. But here in this particular case, if you play bishop to b4 too early, then bishop to d2 is going to happen. White is solving many positional problems. Will afterwards then play knight to c3, maybe in the later stage also e4 will have a dominant position in the center of the board and could have really a comfortable game. So here in the continuation now, after move knight to f3, my recommendation is to play the move d5, because no way, in my opinion, that black is going to be challenged in this way. C takes d5 would be, in my opinion, a positional inaccuracy for white, because after e takes d5, look at this bishop is coming into the game. The light square bishop in many occasions is a bad piece because it's simply blocked out by its own pawn structure. But now after c takes d5, e takes d5, the light square bishop gets out. You can fix the position with the move c6 here. The bishop comes on d6. Maybe we play afterwards knight to d7, queen to b6. So this would be, I think, a beautiful setup for black. So in my opinion here, already a powerful game for black. But that's why here after move d5, here Zahak played the 3 knights variation of the Queen's Gambit Decline. And my recommendation, my two recommendations that I like to play is the Vienna variation here with the move d takes c4, creates really some dynamics in the center of the board, and also bishop to b4, now the beautiful Ragozin defense. And from this point on, white has many choices. In my opinion, one of the best methods for white is to play now the so-called Alekhine variation that also Zahak played. Queen to a4, really good move, hitting the bishop and also the king. It forces now the move knight to c6. Black needs now to play this move. But notice, this move knight to c6 is protecting the bishop on b4, but the downside about this move is that it stops simply the further progress of blacks here on the queen side. The black would love to play moves like c5, breaking enter here, a6, b5. Black would love, of course, to have a good attack here on this side of the board. So that's why this move knight to c6 blocks out really a little bit black's progress. So that's why white is playing this move queen to a4 in the first place in order to stop black's progress. So we have now e3, we have kingside castling, and now queen to c2. As I said, if you play c takes d5, after e takes d5, notice that this light square bishop is coming into the game. The dark square bishop of white is simply blocked out. So in my opinion here, it's a much better position for black. I would love to play now this position from black's perspective. In my opinion, really not a good continuation here for white. So that's why queen to c2, keeping the queen active here. We have now rook to e8. This is a good move here by the Dragon engine, because something could maybe get cleared with e5, e takes d4 and similar stuff. The e file could could be very dangerous. So here the rook is getting already on the file where the king is. So as I said, this could be dangerous. And also what this move rook to e8 is doing, it liberates now a very important square for the bishop. So sometimes the move a3 could come, and then you keeping the bishop on f8, hiding a little bit with the bishop, but staying still active on this diagonal. And here the rook is much better than on f8. We can agree, I think. So it's, I think, a double-edged now move here by the dragging engine. So we have now bishop to d2. Notice now that here the bishop on d2 is actually a bad piece. So it's simply a blocked out bishop by its own pawn structure. So what the Zahak engine is trying to do is maybe get this knight somewhere and maybe trade off the bishop. So then, of course, white would trade off a bad piece for its opponent's best piece on the board. So it makes sense. Bishop to d2, placing the bishops now against each other. So now that's why the drag engine retreats to f8. It's not allowing this kind of a positional trades of piece. And now comes bishop to e2. Notice how d takes c4 never was played so far in the game by black. If d takes c4 happens too early, then bishop to c4 comes with the tempo. So the bishop gets very active into the game. Now the drag engine is waiting the bishop to come to e2, but now after d takes c4, bishop to c4, so you see the bishop to play twice. So it's almost like white lost the tempo in this scenario. So we have now knight to b4 hitting the queen. We have queen to b3 attacking the knight, and now c5. And this move is really brilliant. As I said, we're hitting now the center of the board. If you have noticed, white is now two dominant pawns in the center. So when it comes to pawn counts, white is here a pawn central control. White has a dominant position in the center. So that's why with the move c5, we're undermining now a little bit white center, and we're creating now further dynamics in the game. So we have now d takes c5, and now knight to d3. Bishop to c5 is not good. You cannot take the pawn like this. You'll lose the game immediately. This would be a dirty trap. Knight to a4 hitting the bishop. Now if you retreat, of course, we have a double attack now by the bishop and also by the queen against the bishop. So it's game over here for black. So that's why after move d takes c5, the drag engine played a really beautiful gambit line. Knight to d3 after bishop to d3, queen to d3. Here the drag engine lost a pawn, but has now a bishop pair that could maybe cause some damage in the game. Look at this. This is really a wild line. In my opinion, it's for those who really want to play really dynamic in a dynamic way. White is keeping now the pawn. The problem is now after queen to d3, this move is coming, knight to b5. This was also the continuation by Zahak with the threat to play knight to d6. This pawn is protecting the d6 square. We're trying, of course, to simplify the game here from white's perspective, which really makes sense. Black is having the bishop pair, and when you're up a pawn, basically you want to go into an endgame. You don't want to complicate things now too much. You want to go into an endgame where we have this 3 versus 2 pawn majority on the queen side, and this would be then a completely winning endgame. So that's why you have to make, from black's perspective, something out of your dynamic, something out of your bishop pair. So it seems in the beginning that something is going wrong here for black, because probably many of you are thinking, dude, what you're talking about, the d6 is weak, the queens are off the board. But actually there is now really a brilliant move that you can play, queen to d8. And queen to d8 in the beginning is again nothing special, but notice now in the near future, this, first of all, the pawn is hanging here on c5, and also we have here the potential expansion on the queen side. If the bishop moves, for instance, from this diagonal, then we have also some threats of queen to a5 hitting the knight and also hitting the king. So black is getting a beautiful piece activity. If white wants to lose, of course, the c5 pawn, then white didn't gain anything out of this attack. So with the bishop pair, probably black is going to be much better if white doesn't protect now the pawn on c5. So that's why here the Zahak engine played a bishop to b4. We have now a5 hitting the bishop, a4 hitting the queen, and now after move queen to c4, notice now there are some tensions around the square a5. Queen to a5 could happen, but queen to a5 immediately is not so good. You cannot play the game like this immediately, because bishop to b4 is going to happen. The only way maybe to survive this is to play queen to a6, but again, knight to d6 is going to happen. Simplified line now for white. For queen to c4, knight to c4, knight to d7, maybe attacking the pawn here on c5, knight to d6, and here white should be winning. So queen to a5 immediately wouldn't be so good. So it doesn't make sense. But now after queen to c4, bishop to d7 is going to happen, and now with queen to a5, we are threatening a double attack. You see, the king would be attacked and also the knight, and afterwards we would simply pick up the piece. So really great attack so far by the dragon engine. So that's why here the Zahak engine retreated, simply castle kingside now, and now queen to a5 anyway, attacking now the knight on b4. So we have here now knight to d4, we have rook to c8, continuing now the pressure on c5. White needs now to protect the position somehow, plays now bishop to b4, queen to c7, again staying very active around the square c5. If, as I said, black manages to somehow take out the pawn, then black is having the bishop pair and could have really a solid game. So that's why rook from a to c1, protecting now the pawn on c5, and now queen to b8, and it seems so that white is defending now the position, that really something went wrong here for the dragon engine. So now comes queen to e2, e5, hitting simply the knight. This is really good move here by the dragon engine, attacking the knight has to retreat, and now e4. Look at this, with the move e4, this long diagonal is now liberated for the queen, and now what we're trying to do is to play knight to g4 and threatening even a checkmate here on h2. So okay, as I said, black gave up a pawn in an early stage of the game, but I think the dynamics that black gained here are really cool. The bishop is okay, it's a little bit blocked out now. Okay, white is having this extra pawn, but look at this, how beautiful you can play now the game. After e4, the knight has to retreat. Now queen to e5 was played by the dragon engine, because it's very necessary now to play first queen to e4, because your queen could be locked here with the move knight to d6. So that's why you don't want to play the game like this. You're first playing queen to e5, now knight to d6. Okay, creates a fork, bishop to d6, c takes d6, and we have reached now a position where we have opposite colored bishops. But I think what we have here is this powerful space advantage. On the fourth rank, we have two of this very annoying pawns, and now, as I said, knight to g4 with the direct threat to deliver checkmate is now the serious problem that bothers white now in the continuation of the game. Although we have to say it, white still has this annoying pawn on d6, is having maybe a potential good endgame, but we don't want to get this game to an endgame. We want to play now very powerful against the castle king here on the king side. So that's why knight to g4. It forces now the move g3. You cannot play the game differently. You can maybe play f4 to simplify the game and maybe to protect the long diagonal. But now after e takes f3, knight to f3, queen to e3 could happen. Knight to e3, queen takes e3, knight to e3. Okay, maybe this should be an equalish line. But still, I would love to play more this game from black's perspective. We have now an isolated pawn here. We have here a pawn majority on the king side. The knight is very active. We can also play bishop to c6. So there are many opportunities that black can do. Probably this game would end in a draw, and maybe this was the only chance maybe for this other engine, Zahak, to prolong the game. After move knight to g4, maybe f4 was the way to defend its position. But now after move g3, the problem is now, okay, you have protected your h2 square, but now look at this. You have many light square problems here. Black is having the light square bishop. You yourself don't have a light square bishop, so you cannot protect, of course, your light squares with your dark square bishop. So now what the dragon engine is trying to do is somehow sneak in with the queen here on light squares, with the bishop here somehow, and maybe even deliver checkmate on g2. So here queen to f6 was played. First, the idea somehow is to get rid of this knight. The knight is standing in the way on the square f3. Here in the continuation, we have rook to c7, rook to c7, d takes c7, and notice that now both of these pieces, here the bishop on d7 and the rook on e8, are controlling the c8 square. So okay, maybe you have your pawn, maybe you have this extra pawn on the c file, but I think it's really hard to make progress with the c pawn, because you cannot promote it to c8 because black is having a dominant position around the square. So it's really hard for for white to make something out of this. In my opinion, black's attack here on light squares is much more powerful than white's attack here with the supported pawn. So that's why here after d takes c7, knight to e5, with the idea to play knight to f3, e takes f3, and further weaken the light squares in white's camp. So here in the continuation, rook to c1, rook to c8, blocking it out, knight to d2, bishop to h3. Look how the dragging engine is coming now in with this powerful light square. Bishop a3, we have now h5, queen to queen to e2, h4, rook to c5, hitting now the knight here, bishop to d7. We have now rook to c2. You see, white is really desperate here. White doesn't know where to go with his pieces because white doesn't have better opportunities. The only opportunity I see that white is having in this position is simply this pawn, but it doesn't have support. It has only the support by the rook, by no other piece so far. So we have now h3 by the dragging engine, further weakening the light squares here in white's camp. So rook to c3, and now bishop to g4, finally attacking now also the f3 weakness. Queen to b5, knight to f3. We have knight to f3, and now queen to f3. You have to play now here queen to h1 because it's now serious threat, the checkmate on g2. And notice there is now a beautiful deflection motif, bishop to e6, and what we're trying to do is bishop to c4. We are trying somehow to deflect the queen from the square f1. That's now the main tactical goal, sort of. It's really hard to make that happen immediately, but as a long-term tactic you should consider this move. Bishop to c4, deflection of the queen, checkmate on g2. So this is now the main issue. So we have now bishop to d7, we have now rook to c1, b6, bishop to d6, and now g5. Here the dragging engine is continuing the pressure on the king side. We have rook to c4, g4, again simply locking everything on light squares. We have rook to b4, and now finally b5. And look at this, mission accomplished. I think b5, bishop to e6, and then bishop to c4. This is one main tactical motif. So we have now bishop to e5, bishop to e6, and look at this. If you take now rook to b5 immediately, bishop to c4 is going to happen. We have the fork against both of these pieces. The queen gets deflected, and now we deliver checkmate on g2. So far, look at this effort. Queen to bishop to e6, rook to b5, or queen to b5 is simply not a possibility. So that's why rook to d4. We have now f6, kicking away the bishop, but here this Zahak engine tried to play the game a little bit differently. Here we have a rook to d8, rook king to f7, and after bishop to d6, we have now rook to c7, sacrificing simply here some material. But now after bishop to c7, now comes this motif. As we said, bishop to c4, the tactics is working here. It's simply now a lost game here for white. So we have now first a check, rook to d7, nothing special, no perpetuals are possible, of course. We have now a rook to d4, bishop to f1, king to f1. Now we have a check, and now the drag engine simply grabs too much material here on the king side, simply removes the queen and pushes now the pawn further. In one particular moment here, white has to even give up the rook now for the pawn, and now after queen to h1, it's obviously completely winning game here for white. So let's see the continuation. Here the drag engine moves simply the king closer, took now also this pawn. Here simply check, you have to protect your bishop. The drag engine picks up another pawn. Here also very nice motif, queen to c3 after king to c3. In this position, the Zahak engine resigns. So here king to g4 is going to happen. You can maybe play queen to b4, but here after f5, here actually king to g3, and black is much faster in the attack. You can maybe also try to push the pawn, but notice here a potential promotion on f1 would come with a check, and white would lose a decisive tempo. So really great game, I think, here by the dragging engine. I really loved this gambit line in the beginning, so let's go back with this idea. So when we're playing here d takes c4, then after bishop to c4, knight to b4, and now with c5, not immediately to take out the pawn on c5. We have seen it would be a devastating mistake. Knight to d3, bishop to d3, queen to d3. Okay, you have some issues, but now, as we said, don't trade off the queens, which is, I think, good for white. So that's why queen to d8, and now with bishop to d7, bishop to c5, a5, a4, we have seen our dynamic opportunities here for black. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. Interesting ideas of the Ragozin defense for sure. Please check out also our our Nimzo-Indian Defense game that we have seen a couple of days ago, also played by Dragon. I think it was also perfect play. So these two videos I think you should watch combined, because in the beginning you have seen here the anti-Nimzo or the counter Nimzo Indian has been played, so you cannot play then the Nimzo Indian, of course. So you should really have a good preparation in both of these lines. So in my opinion, the Nimzo Indian, but also then to play the Ragozin defense against the anti-Nimzo Indian is perfectly fine. So these two openings are brilliant in your preparation, I think, against d4. So here's the link of the video, you can check it out. And if you want to see maybe some other top engine games played by Dragon Engine, Stockfish Engine, and many more, here's also the link of our beautiful series, Commented Chess Games Played by Computers. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what to say, chess is the best, of course.